Ooh.
We are live.
This is Literary Roadhouse. One short story once a week. I'm Anise.
I'm Remy.
I'm Maya.
And I'm Gerald.
And this week we're discussing Mastiff by Joyce Carol Oates. Spoilers ahead. Mastiff examines the relationship between a 41-year-old woman and a 57-year-old man who have been dating for 7 weeks. In the story, they decide to undergo a hike up to a peak with a view. Along the way, the woman reflects on the man, her life, her personality, and so forth. The man, though the reader is given less time in his perspective, learns that the man has recently realized he is lonely and hopes the relationship may blossom. During the hike, the woman is scared by a mastiff. Towards the end of the hike, the new couple meet the mastiff again, and the dog attacks the woman viciously. The man jumps to her defense. In the end, the woman suffers minor cuts, but the man needs stitches, surgery, and is hospitalized for an underlying heart condition. During his hospitalization, the woman again reflects on her relationship with the man, but sees him differently, more generously now. The man stabilizes, the woman spends the night, and dreams of the hike again. In her dream, the hike and the man are more beautiful, but she still hears the panting of the mastiff.
Okay, I love this story. Just gonna get that out of the way. I didn't think I would because it's written in a very distant way to distance the reader from the characters. But as that distance closes towards the end, it mirrors a lot of stuff. There's a lot of other stuff going on in the story, and I'm looking forward to talking about it. How did you guys feel about the story?
For the tape,
really,
I
Gerald?
down.
Really? I would have thought, some almost 60-year-old dude pulling a 41-year-old would have made you all excited. Just saying.
I didn't draw that parallel, strangely enough, but even though you've highlighted it for me, it doesn't change my opinion. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm kind of. So it really depends on what you think the story is about. Changes whether or not I like it. If it's a story about an insufferable woman who has no self-awareness and how that reflects on her life choices, then very effective writing, because that's what I got. But if it's something else, I'm like, oh God, I could not stand the female protagonist at all.
I thought,
how about you,
I thought it
Remy?
was okay, but I didn't like the ending.
So I'm the only one that liked this story?
Looks that way.
Wow. Okay, well, that puts me in an odd position this week. I don't think that's ever happened. Usually there's at least one of y'all. It must be that I'm a genius.
Must be. Enlighten us.
Maybe Anise will run to your aid when you tell her show her.
You know what? I'll say that if I had read the story 2 weeks ago, I would not have liked it.
Okay.
And the thing that's changed in the last 2 weeks, I talked about this on the Bradbury Challenge, so Gerald's already heard this, was I was reading one of the Nail Your Novel books by Roz Morris, and she was talking about showing versus telling. And one of the things she said was, you show when the emotions and the experience are the important part, and you tell when what's actually happening isn't what's most important. So as I was reading the story and I felt that distance between myself and the characters, I thought, well, there's a distance there, that it's obviously well written, so there's a reason why there's a distance there. And once I started looking at the underlying and stopped looking at the story as just characters going on a hike, I found that there was a whole rich underpinning to the story that really made it enjoyable for me. For me, the story is about two people who are very alone, who aren't being intimate with each other in any real way because of fear or just habit in the man's case. But they want to. They want to, but they just can't cross that border. And at the moment when he gets attacked, she sees what he's really made of. And in the hospital, she lets her guard down. She lets emotions start to come through. And at that point, you start to come in a little closer to the characters. And towards the end, she goes to his wallet and she sees his real age. She sees a picture of him when he's younger. And she sits next to him and she starts to fall asleep in his presence, which is something that she had a difficult time doing before. And so by the end of the story, when she's hearing that mastiff, it's like, is it the mastiff? Is it the fear of hearing his breathing for the remainder of her life because she's opened herself up in this intimate way finally? So for me, the story was about intimacy. It really wasn't about the particular people involved. And that's a pretty literary way to write a story. But once I got that, I found it really enjoyable.
Isn't there a danger though that you have read it as a writer, so and you're picking up these things because you're a writer and you read Roz Morris's book, and as readers wouldn't necessarily pick up that
I
nuance.
think people who are really heavily read, who read a lot of literary fiction, probably would have. I'm not that heavily read, so like I used to be, but I'm not so much anymore. So I've lost a lot of those skills. I think if I'd read this in my 20s, I would have really liked it too. Just because I was reading a lot more like dense crap. But if you're a person that reads a story because you want to lose yourself in the experience and you want to enjoy the changing of people, you might not let yourself think, what is the writer trying to say here? Whereas somebody that reads a lot of literary fiction is probably more prone to that. I don't think this is a story for everybody, but I do think it's a really well done story. And I do think that the story isn't necessarily about the people. I think it's about the experience of growing intimacy between people. Because if it was about the people, she would have brought us closer.
Well, so that's the thing. So I agree with you. There was a good parallel between the Mastiff and the man. They're both described as like breathing wetly and loudly and panting through their mouths. Both of them are described that way. She also has this thing where she does, earlier in the story, she says how she doesn't like to see him naked because naked and horizontal, he seems bigger and like more animalistic. She doesn't use the word animalistic, but like that's the vibe. But the thing is, I didn't like that she kept using the man and the woman when I actually thought the woman especially was very particularly drawn, but in a show not tell way, which is like you're in this woman's head with all her thoughts and all the thoughts are incongruent with what is happening. So she has this thing where she like resents the man for not paying attention to details about her. And it's like, really? Because didn't he go to your art gallery the week before and buy something? Like there's all these things that, or she like says that she resents when he's taking pictures because he's taking pictures for an hour of the scenery. And she says, the woman had never been so reposed in herself. Really? Because the whole car, like there's this like lack of self-awareness where the things that she's thinking don't match up very well with what is happening, which to me seems so specific. So then to have her be the woman as if she could be any woman, to me was a little bit like, really? I don't see her as any woman. She seems selfish and self-absorbed and intelligent, but also neurotic and just very specific to me in a way that I was like, just use her name because
see, for me, I think if Carol Oates had used her name, the subtext might have gotten lost because it would have brought me closer to the characters, and the subtext wouldn't have been the thing that was shining brightest.
Yeah, I didn't.
It would have
read
become
into
about
the
the
story.
characters.
I didn't read into the story as deeply as you did, Maya. So I get what Gerald was trying to say about that.
Yeah. See, I felt like I did read deeply into the story, but I really didn't like the main character. And I think I almost resented calling her the woman. Because normally when you do that, it's a trick to make her anyone. And it's like, really? And also the guy is described as being famously generous in his university and having a lot of hobbies and being very intelligent. And he does pay attention to her in the car ride. They were happy together because he was paying attention to her and talking to her and everything like that. And it was so weird to me that this guy has already been sort of making an effort, went to her art gallery, is trying, but he doesn't get let in until he almost dies, saving her from a dog attack. That's when he's good enough.
But in her defense, have you ever like been with a dude for like an hour while he was doing something meticulous and totally blocking you out?
Yeah, my boyfriend's a photographer all the time. Like
that but in the beginning, it takes a little bit of getting used to. Like that's not something that's like instantly you recognize that's the type of dude he is. That's something that you in the beginning you're like, what's wrong with me? Why isn't he paying attention to me? And then after a while you realize, oh, he's that kind of man. And then you make allowances for it.
Yeah, I found both characters annoying and sort of unbelievable too, because they're supposed to be intelligent.
Really?
I thought they had. I disconnected with both of them. I didn't like either of them, and I also didn't like the way that the woman was drawn as sort of a very weak woman and And he was just ignorant, and I just there was so much of the story was about how they were as individuals and how they were together, and how much time he spent ignoring her or not thinking about her, or the emotional disconnect between the two characters. So much time was spent playing that out that by the time the sort of good stuff started coming at the end, I just lost interest in them.
Yeah, you'd already kind of checked out.
Yeah. Plus, I don't think the guy was as emotionally disconnected as she was. Remember, a lot of that emotional disconnection is not in his point of view; it's in hers. And you see all these double standards where she's like, when she used to go on dates, she wasn't exclusive, she wasn't monogamous, but she would be deeply hurt if the guy had fooled around. And she's like, she's thinking about him sort of intellectually, and she's like, I don't think I could love him, but maybe he could love me, and that would be enough. Like, she has all these weird double standards that make her so unlikable, that I think that's why I also didn't believe her when she's like, he doesn't pay any attention to me, because all these little clues that he does, it's sort of like she wants to be the center of his universe, and he can't also be his own person. And that, I think, was the thing where I was like, if this is a story about a total lack of self-awareness and how that kind of makes you the worst, very effective writing, because that came across.
Yeah, she was not self-aware at all. I actually agree with you on how she was drawn. That didn't turn me off of the story. Neither of them are very likable. They both have too many walls up. They're both not very self-aware, but they're trying. And that's what I got from it.
And sort of adding to the bit where I said I didn't like how the woman was portrayed by the author. And I just looked back, and there's a bit near the start where that I highlighted, where the friend closer to the man and the woman said to the man, "You like Mariella, you'll like her face." And to the woman, "Simon's an extraordinary person, but it may not be evident immediately. Give him time." So for the man, it's all about how she looks, and yet for the woman, it's all about what an extraordinary man he is. And
it's into a perfect next topic: stereotypes.
Okay.
This whole thing is full of stereotypes, Gerald.
Yep.
Yeah.
Did that turn you off?
Yeah, it turned me off, because I've got this thing about how women are portrayed in fiction, and yes, that's a particular thing to me. But in this case, I think, and there were several more examples where it's almost as if the author had a real downer on the female character, and they both had their faults and their emotional problems, but and the double standards that you just mentioned about having other relationships. So the author was turning me off the woman and turning me off her writing of the woman.
Speaking of stereotypes, this did the Twilight thing of like, I'm not really that pretty. I'm so plain with my narrow chin, my big eyes, my petite frame. And sometimes my girlfriend's husbands linger and put their arm around me, but I'm really not that pretty. Like, it did that way. I was like, why is this happening in a Joyce Carol Oates story? Like, why?
It makes me wonder, when was this written?
I think 2013.
No, was it written 2013? I think she was still alive. I guess.
Let me see.
Guess so. She's still alive.
Quite old, but she's still alive.
I don't know. Like, are we to believe they're living up to their stereotypes? But are they living up to their stereotypes in a way that is just who they are? Or are they living up to their stereotypes as a point? And for me, there was a point there, but I can see how that would turn people off. Like, there were so many stereotypes, even down to her height. Like, she's 5'3", and she always wished that she was 5'10" and could walk with a sexual swagger, but she can't. And she's so little that she has to always play the little woman. I'm sorry, I've known a lot of little women that don't play the little woman, even in shows like The Killing. Like, the main cop is like, she's like 5 foot tall, and she's like all personality.
Yeah.
It's almost like they've accepted these roles that they have to live, and the roles that they've chosen have prevented them from being intimate with other people. And it's only stuff away that you can see who's really behind there. Does that happen in real life? I think it does. I think that's probably why it didn't turn me off as much, but I can definitely see how that would turn people off.
Yeah.
Maybe the characteristics or attributes of the woman isn't as generalizable as Anais is saying to just make her kind of a blanket woman, but I guess they are stereotypes for a reason. So like you said, Maya, there are people who are like that and may see some parts of themselves in this character of a woman, so might be more likely to identify with it. But as we were talking, I just thought, to me, it seemed like the reluctance to get more deeply involved in the relationship was coming more from the woman's side. And I feel that maybe she started making up all of these excuses about how the man is inadequate in several ways, just as a sign of her own insecurity, because she is nervous about, trying to be in a committed relationship with him or something like that.
And she does become more likable once she's actually thinking of someone other than herself. Towards the end of the story, she becomes more likable as she is like thinking about like, okay, I gotta get to the hospital and I need to look through his stuff. And she finds out the issue about his heart, and she's thinking about someone else and isn't just putting up these walls. She becomes more likable. But then the dream at the end. So I did like, the parallel between the Mastiff and the man. But then there's like this like gender role thing that basically comes down to like the thing from My Big Fat Greek Wedding, where it's like the man is the head but the woman is the neck. It's basically the dream. Like I was just like, this is really weird. I just found it strange.
I'm sorry, but as a woman who has a propensity for getting into kind of traditional looking relationships, like I date those kind of men. I know this guy. I've seen him. I've gone on dates with him. I've broken up with him. I have no problem with gender roles as long as they're agreed upon. So if you want to be egalitarian, talk about that in advance. If you want to have gender roles, talk about that in advance. I have no problem with the ways different people have their relationships as long as it's agreed upon and not a default. But that final dream, I didn't get that. I don't know. One of the things I did get, though, and it was definitely like strengthened by Rami's comment, was towards the end when she's getting emotional. Like I think she already liked the guy, but like Rami said, she's thinking of all these reasons why he can't be okay. But deep down inside, she does care about him, and she's literally freaking out in the hospital room. And when they ask her who she is, she says fiance without even thinking about how to make an excuse to be able to see him or anything. It was just automatic. And she's in there freaking out, and people are looking at her the way they look at women when they're getting ready to lose somebody important to them. And I think that says something to me about her unawareness. She isn't even aware of just how much he actually does mean to her. But he does mean something to her. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been completely freaking out. She would have been very perfunctory, done what was needed to be done, and gotten out of there, called his next of kin.
Yeah, because there was a bit where he was injured and excuse me, and yeah, the author writes this: years ago in high school, she'd taken a course in first aid, but could she remember it now? For a tourniquet, you had to use a stick. Her eyes darted about, searching for what? Like a foolish trapped bird, her heart beat erratically in her chest. I just think it's just. She's just a caricature. This silly weak woman. It's this. Oh, I don't know what to do. I can't. And the thing where the thing where she says if she couldn't love the man, it might be enough for the man to love her. Enough for them to have a child together at least. Like what?
She's 41. Her clock is way past ticking, dude. It's like it's turned into a dirge. It's like in the back of her head, don't.
I know that,
but it's still possible.
Barely. Statistically, like she is definitely on the small side of the bell curve.
Yes, but since her time is running out, I mean, I would understand someone still being optimistic in her position.
Yeah, but her optimism is, I probably won't love him, but he can love me. Wow.
Your standards go down real quick if you want to have kids and you're 41. You'll just take what you can get.
and how can they? I know they haven't been together very long, but how can how can she say the news to Quinton been notified in emergency? A woman with a man's last name, possibly a sister who lived in San Diego. How does she not know whether he's got a sister in San Diego?
Because they haven't been talking. Like she said, they haven't been intimate. They've been having sex, but they haven't been emotionally intimate. They haven't talked about their past.
But yeah, it's like, hello, what's your name? Hello, what's your... Have a drink, yes. So, and that's the first thing you do. You do talk, yes, I've got a sister.
Gerald, that's because you're normal.
Well, maybe, or abnormal or something. But that's it's those little things annoyed me about the story itself, and portraying the woman as this sort of weak and fragile little thing, and that doesn't know what she's doing, and that annoyed me too. So
especially for like a 41-year-old intelligent woman who I'm not even sure where she does, but it seems sort of like an academic type career or adjacent.
She owns like art gallery.
Oh, art gallery. She has an art gallery. Okay, how do you get to be 41 and be this clueless about everything? Like everything.
Yes.
Like what
exactly?
They're nothing.
I just have to say, this is one of those episodes where I wish our listeners could see all of Gerald's mannerisms when he describes the woman, because his hands and his shoulders. It's perfect.
Yeah. but again, like, okay, so if the thing is, if this is a story about how like this lack of self-awareness makes her insufferable, as soon as she thinks about somebody else, she becomes more likable. As soon as you get out of being self-absorbed and you engage with the world, you're better. Cool. But I feel like the tone and the voice of the story isn't making that conclusion. I want it to be, but that's not what it's doing.
Yeah, it's almost as if there's too much of the story that paints this picture time and time again, and it's almost as if you can't. I couldn't sort of see. It's like seeing the wood for the trees. I just saw this bleak and annoying to me story, and I just got disconnected with it, and it was just too much. It was laid on.
Which makes me wonder, how do you write a story about annoying people and not turn the readers off? Because I actually like stories about annoying, unsufferable, unlikable human beings trying to make their way through the world. But I know this is a thing where when your character is unlikable, it's really hard to keep readers into whatever you're writing. And I'm just wondering for you guys, have you had experiences of reading stories or books where the character is unlikable, but you've still been pulled in?
Yeah, you have to. They have to have some redeeming feature, unless they're a caricature bad guy villain. But in this one, it's a main character, so it would have been nice for her to sort of understand her fragility, or be annoyed by her fragility, or recognize her fragility, or I don't know.
See, I thought that's what she was doing.
No, it shows some sort of strength as well as the fragility. It's like Annie says, she's 41 and she owns an art gallery, and yet it's like she had no strong qualities, not that came out in the story anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was actually thinking, like, books that I've read that have unlikable characters. The thing is, they're never 100% unlikable, or else, but like characters that like are more unlikable than likable, pretty much almost all of Junot Díaz's protagonists or narrators are like not really likable as a whole, but there's just enough about them that is interesting, good, strong, motivated, moving towards something that you can still follow them throughout the story, even if a lot of the times you're rolling your eyes at them and you're like, oh, Junior, you're doing this again, right? And there's a few short stories we've read. For example, The Snows of Kilimanjaro. Was it? Yeah, The Snows of Kilimanjaro. Yeah. The guy was extremely unlikable, right? He was like mean to the woman. He was self-absorbed as well. And he was like thinking about his past. And like everything he'd done in the past was like also not great. And this woman who's like providing for him, he sees as like an idiot who fell for his tricks. But still, the story is engaging because I guess in that one, I guess it's also the way it's written. Like, I don't feel like in The Snows of Kilimanjaro, you're supposed to be rooting for this guy at any point. While in this one, I almost feel like you're supposed to be, like it's written in a way where I'm supposed to sympathize and be like, oh, look, she learned a lesson at the end. Good job. Where I'm so annoyed by her that I'm just like, I don't care that you see a guy who almost died for you as generous all of a sudden.
I think it's interesting that you
Yeah.
picked stories that I notoriously didn't like. That's interesting.
Yeah. Where those
But
guys
I
were
did not like it.
yeah.
You raised a really interesting point, Maya, because I'm thinking back and I agree with what Anais is saying, I guess, because that you can't have a detached, aloof character. Like Gerald was saying, there needs to be, I suppose, some redeeming qualities. Because, yeah, Anais says she is likable. The woman is likable by the end of the story. But after what? It literally took someone saving her life for her to start thinking about that person and, get outside of herself.
But is it because, okay, I'm going to play devil's advocate, because I actually see that scene very differently than what you guys see in that scene when he risks his life for her and she's redeemed. I don't see her being redeemed because he risked his life for her and suddenly now she can like him. I actually saw that as the trauma of watching him risk his life and get injured. That trauma forced her walls down. She could no longer pretend that her feelings didn't exist because she was so traumatized she couldn't keep that wall up anymore. And all that was left was fear and worry and caring. And that's when she finally was able to see him as he really was, rather than what she'd been telling herself this whole time, all the reasons why he wasn't good for her. I didn't actually see it as he risked his life for her and therefore now he's good enough for her. Like, that's not how I read that scene. And I think how you read that scene is probably a little bit of a Rorschach's test, but it's also probably like a defining point at, like, either you're going to like the story or you're not. If you're going to read the scene one way, you're going to be turned off. If you're going to read it another way, you're probably going to love it. And I don't know if there's something about the way that's written that determines how you're going to read it. I do find it interesting that the stories that you mentioned with the protagonists that you didn't like were stories that I didn't like. And I don't know, because often we're on opposites ends. And so I don't know what it is, if it's how it's written.
Well, actually, I was going to say, so that reading of it where she did like him all along, but it took a trauma for her to shake her walls down and for her to admit to herself that she liked him all along is a much more generous reading and does make it a bit more likable. But it'd be nice then if she could acknowledge that, like if she could have a moment where she, is like, you know what, maybe the signs were there all along and I just need to be a little bit more open. Like if there was just like a moment where she's like, instead of
you want it said more explicitly out of the protagonist's mouth,
or in the dream, like what if it's like a revisit of the day and it's the exact same event, but so it kind of happened where like now she sees him as more beautiful and the view is more beautiful and she's less absorbed in herself, but I don't know, like it just seemed to me, I guess I just want her to have a little bit more agency, whether it's in her own interior thoughts where you see the character arc growing and she like learns something a bit more explicitly, or she makes a decision, like can she make a decision to take her walls down and be like, okay, that's what just happened and I like this, or something like that.
That's a good point.
Like she continues to be someone to whom things happen. Maybe that's why we don't like her. We don't like characters to whom things just happen to them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she, she wore the wrong shoes for the hike, and she didn't.
She's 41.
Coats.
But what was funny is a lot of those things she did to spite him, like a little kid that's like, my mom told me to do this, so I'm going to do exactly the opposite. I raised that.
And how in a new relationship, you don't do that just to spite this person that you think you might grow to like and at last find someone that you can settle down with or something. You just, I know, I'll play a little game and I'll do just the opposite.
You'll be surprised, Gerald, how many women do think that way. But
really?
I don't understand it and I don't like it, but I have seen it.
Oh dear.
Yeah. Yeah. But actually, it's funny that you mentioned that, because when I was in high school, I had a part-time job at a Payless, and this woman who was probably in her like late 30s, early 40s, come in hysterical because she's, hello?
Yeah.
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 Oh, okay, you guys all froze. Because she's
Yeah,
dating this
listening.
guy who loves to hike, and she didn't own hiking shoes, and she wanted hiking shoes, but she didn't know what she was looking for. And we didn't have any in her size. And she starts crying. I'm like, it's cool. Like in hiking shoes, you can just get a men's size for you. And she's like trying so hard to impress this guy on the hike that she
Oh.
wants to get hiking shoes that make her look like she knows what she's doing. Like that woman is the opposite
The exact opposite.
woman in this story. Ugh.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, I think if I were to describe her transformation of towards this guy, it would be like from begrudging acceptance to appreciation.
Yeah.
I think so. It's not even begrudging acceptance. I don't think. I don't know. It's almost like she's sleepwalking through this relationship, like, and she's doing it because someone told her she should do it or something like that, and so she's doing it because she doesn't really want to do it, and
Well,
she
because
does the
she
wrong
feels
thing.
time is running out.
Yeah, well, she has to make a bit of an effort, maybe. Ay.
Yeah,
So
my
there we go.
internet went out. Sorry.
Yeah.
It happens.
Yeah.
So where were you?
Oh, I was just telling a personal story about a woman that I knew. You'll hear it on the show. It's just basically I met the opposite of this woman, a woman who went to like extreme lengths to find the perfect hiking boots to impress a guy on a date. The opposite of this woman.
That would.
Yeah.
That's funny. That's really funny. Yeah, I wouldn't have shown up in tennis shoes. That's just embarrassing. You want to be confident so that when he does rescue you, he's not rescuing you because he has to. He's rescuing you because he wants to.
She didn't even bring water. How did you not
Yeah.
bring water?
I know.
Like, ah.
She's just pathetic, really. Is pathetic.
Obviously, she's not the woman you would go on a date with, Gerald.
She's not fully active, no. Even though she is 41 and one
You know
or 2
what
years
is
my
interesting
junior.
is there are a lot of characters that are dislikable that turn me off too. And I think the reason why it didn't bother me in the story is because I didn't see the characters as the point of the story. And therefore, them being dislikable, them like being such a stereotype in so many ways was kind of the point, was like not really that big of a deal. Because for me, what the story was about was something completely different. And so I think people are either going to read this and they either hate it or love it. I don't think there's going to be any in-betweens on readers in the story.
Oh,
You guys read any other of her work?
no.
No.
Me neither. I'm wondering if how the rest of her work is, if it's very polarizing like this story is, or if it's more conventional.
Mm.
It's kind of interesting. I think it was the New Yorker that the New Yorker or whoever interviewed her about this story, and so she talked about, you know, what it is and why she wrote it and all this sort of stuff, and I still didn't like it.
What did she say?
I can't remember. It was something pathetic. I don't know.
You know what? I love when Gerald really hates a story.
When I hate a story, I really
Because
hate
his version of hating a story is just so English compared to our version of hating a story. Like, his criticisms are just sharp, but they're just still like really polite.
Yes.
Are we ready to rate this thing, or was there anything else you guys want to talk about?
I also didn't like the way it was written. It was almost it's just mostly short sentences. They did this, they did this, she did that, she thought this. It didn't flow, the writing for me. And again, maybe that was deliberate, but I just again it was, I don't know, it just seemed strange.
Wow!
Wow!
But you like short sentences. You like Hemingway.
I do. Maybe because I'm just looking at it. Maybe because, you know, it was the woman, the man. Maybe that sort of affected how I read it, and maybe that it sort of didn't make sense to keep calling them the woman, the man. But yeah, that was probably deliberate because they were distant. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, let's rate it.
Any, was there anything else that you hated about the story?
I wouldn't say I hated the prose, but I also wasn't. There wasn't any line that I highlighted like ooh, you know. It was just kind of whatever prose wise. Competent. Not even. It was whatever. It's a new word. The W word. It was whatever.
I did highlight something.
I have something to say about that. Since we are kind of being kind of hard on this story, there were some things that I did like. I liked the author, Joyce Carol Oates. She was good at capturing subtle interactions, I felt. So where like one example is when the guy invites the woman on the hike. She says he didn't explicitly ask her. He asked if she wanted to join him. And that way, because he's going hiking this weekend anyway, so that way he doesn't risk being rejected. And I felt like that was a nice description of this method because I can see a guy doing that. Not that I have.
Is that how you ask girls out, Remy?
No, that's what I just wanted to put that disclaimer out there. I tend to be more direct with things, but I can see people doing that. And also, when she first saw the Mastiff, Joyce Carol Oates says she waited for the man to touch her shoulder, as another man might have done, to reassure her. And you know, these are like another subtle kind of movements. Or when they were in the car, when the woman was recollecting being in the car, the woman slid over in the passenger seat to sit closer to the man, as a young girl might do impulsively. Yeah. So those little subtle pieces of like affection is something I really like. That I think that takes talent to capture.
I agree with you, Remy. There was a lot of subtlety and a lot of like you can tell the writer spent a lot of time watching people when they're getting to know each other early in relationships, because there's a lot of like body language and really subtle things that rang very true to me. One of the lines that I really liked was the first description of the dog.
Wait, no,
it was
so
like
that
very
I felt
animal.
was kind of awkward because I highlighted
Really?
that, but not because I liked it. That its large, long tongue, as rosy pink as a sexual organ, dripping in slobber. I was like, that's an awkward way to describe a tongue.
Well, I knew you wouldn't like that sentence, Remy, when I read it, but I liked that sentence. Yeah. It was like a very animalistic, like gruesome, like this dog. It's like visceral, like meaty kind of description. Like that whole section. Its head was larger than hers, with pronounced black muzzle, bulging glassy eyes. Its jaws were powerful and slack. Like the description of the dog, I really liked, and made me feel kind of gross, and made me feel kind of like a miniature version of what she might have felt seeing the dog.
Okay.
Yeah, Remy's a genius this episode, of course, because he agrees with me.
I mean, I agree with Remy. She captures subtleties well. I guess I was just so put off by everything else that I'm just like, okay.
You know what? It's not lyrical writing.
Yeah.
It isn't lyrical. It doesn't have, like, it's the type of writing that kind of gets out of the way in order to let the story kind of lead. But the writing doesn't have any features to it that, you know, where you would say this writer is poetic or this writer has, like, a really simple style. Like, it's kind of, I don't know. It's hard to get your hands on what exactly her style is. I think I have to read a bunch more of her stuff.
I think for me, the writing did get in the way, and I think the strange way, the sort of staccato statements, the man, the woman, I think as soon as I started reading it, I sort of felt I was going to struggle to get through it, and I got through it. I mean, it's
kind of perfunctory. It's like a perfunctory, matter-of-fact way of describing what's happening.
I think it's a bit worse than that. It's a little bit mannered. It's almost it's kind of hard to describe it, and the way I'm describing it sounds like it would be the sort of writing that I would like, and you know, the direct and Um,
I actually found the writing very masculine feeling. Like I had to go check because I thought maybe it was a male Joyce. Because it has like that really short, perfunctory, masculine kind of like middle century kind of man writer feel to it in some ways. Maybe a little more nuanced than what I would expect. Like I'm not a huge Hemingway fan. I think sometimes he's lacking in nuance that kind of is annoying to me. But it felt like that kind of school of writer. And so I went into this expecting that you would like it.
There you go.
Okay, I'll rate seconds. We can break up the horrific rating. Who's going to go first? How low are you going to go?
I'll do it.
Limbo!
Okay, so I think actually Maya and Rami raised my original rating up half a point, so I'm coming in now at a 3.5.
Oh, really? That high? I would have thought you would have come in around a 2.
Well, I didn't love it at all, as it is obvious, but this is the Kenichi Prophecy. Other stories that I've given 2s and 1s to, like this is like, okay, this is probably gonna be the meanest thing I've ever said on the podcast, but this is annoying in the most basic way you can be annoying, which is like, you know what I mean? Like it's
all the story basic.
Yeah, because you're like playing on like gender roles and stereotypes. It's annoying in like the most like I said, the Twilight, I'm ugly, beautiful thing. Yeah, like it's not especially annoying. It's not like it's invented a whole new category of what is this. It's a common category of annoying for me.
Yeah.
Okay, next time you read a Junot Diaz story and you tell me you love it, we're gonna have words.
I love him.
Which I find him sexist and annoying. I love him personally. I love watching his lectures. I love looking at the man. I want to learn from the man, but I don't necessarily like reading his stuff.
Okay. You were gonna go second, Maya.
Oh, I'll go second. I'm giving it a 5.
Okay.
I was gonna give it a 5.5, but I feel like the story, it's so polarizing. No, I have to give it a 5.5. I liked it a lot. I really, really love the story.
Okay.
So I'm going to go with a 5.5.
It's a 2 from me. And I'm not able
Wow.
to explain
2?
why. Just,
No, don't have to explain
just
why.
Spit it out there. 2.
Okay, Rami.
I'll go with a 4.
See, I still like you.
I like you too.
No Kenichi Prophecy. Okay. So for next week, I am submitting the story that is the short story behind Rear Window. I watched Rear Window and I found out it was originally from a short story, and there was like a whole legal case about it because it was like supposedly stolen by Alfred Hitchcock. And so I am submitting It Had to Be Murder by Cornell Woolrich.
Cool.
Very good.
That's the story that Rear Window was based on, you're saying?
Yep.
With that story too.
He wants to read it that bad.
Double the odds. Because I really like that movie.
It's a good movie, yeah.
It is a very good movie. I'll submit Gender Studies by Curtis Sittenfeld.
Okay.
I think I read that. Did I read that?
We read Bad Latch by Curtis Sittenfeld. And
yeah.
And gender studies got a lot of attention in the media.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I looked at it. Okay.
Cool. And Rami's resubmitting what Maya submitted first.
Good. I never win these things.
Okay. So, the quiz is nice and simple. I'm going to read out a fact about a Mastiff. You got to tell me if it's true or false. Did I make it up or is it real? Mastiff facts.
I love you, Eddie.
Okay, we're going to go Rami, Maya, Gerald.
Okay.
Rami. The biggest Mastiff on record weighed 343 pounds.
True.
It
It is true. His name was Zorba. Or her name. I don't know.
His name is Zorba. He is a master. He is very big.
Okay. Maya.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Gerald.
I'm the one that's been
Look on his
drinking
face.
here.
The look on his face was priceless.
He always pulls that face when you sing. Like that is a given.
Like, what the hell?
He's like, why is this happening? Why? Actually, this is something that Europeans have told me is like, so Americans are portrayed as always like singing and like car rides and random, like just breaking out in song. And they
So I
think
am a living stereotype.
yeah. So like my neighbor's Swedish and we were driving down to the beach, a 6-hour drive, and all the Americans start singing. She's like, it's real. Like you guys really do this.
Oh my god, I love it.
Okay, Maya. The largest dog litter ever was from a Mastiff and totaled 24 puppies. That one's true as well. The
False.
poor Mastiff.
And I knew that.
Okay, Gerald.
You.
Mastiffs, despite their size, are marathon dogs, often used to shadow groups of runners and identify those at risk for fainting or collapse.
That's so weird. It has to be true.
It's false. I just made it up.
Yeah, because they're so slobbery and they breathe so heavy. I wouldn't think they'd do well long distances.
Good.
You
That's
could getting away with a lie. Lots of details.
Yeah.
That's very creative.
Very creative.
Okay,
Got
Rami.
me there.
Due to too much breeding, Mastiffs are missing a toe.
Due to too much breeding?
Yeah, like overbreeding. They're missing a toe.
Inbreeding.
How do those two things relate?
Like when you
Genetics.
genetics, like when you overbreed certain animals, things, get weird and happen to
Weird
them.
stuff happens.
Yeah.
Happens to people too.
I guess true.
False, I made it up.
Ah,
It's weird.
jeez, good.
But it would totally be possible.
Mm-hmm.
When genetic weirdness happens.
Yeah.
Just not that one.
That one had truthiness to it. Like, maybe.
Yeah. He's good at lying.
Maya.
Too good.
Mastiffs were portrayed in ancient Egyptian paintings dating back to 3000 BC.
False.
True.
What?
Yeah.
How do they survive
that old
in
of a
that type
breed?
of climate?
It's a really old breed. It was back in ancient Egypt. There's different types of mastiffs, and apparently, the first record of a mastiff in literature goes back even before.
Wow.
Egyptians.
Oh, I had no idea it was that old of a breed. That's amazing to me.
Mm.
Wowza.
Gerald,
Yeah.
the most expensive dog ever was a mastiff and sold for 1.5 million.
No, that's false.
It's true.
Oh.
What?
Yeah. Okay, so we don't have a tie, but I'm going to give you the tiebreaker anyway because it's hilarious. So that dog that sold for 1.5 million, his name is Big Splash, and he's a red Tibetan Mastiff. And so how much do you think it costs to breed with Big Splash? So if you want to breed your dog with Big Splash, how much you got to pay?
How much do we have to pay for him?
Yeah.
What's so special about him, dude?
Well, this is like a thing. Like, because it's like a perfect show dog. It's like the perfect, like, whatever, like, wins a bunch of titles.
And he's really big and he's easy to train. I've heard of him. There's a couple really big ones that cost a lot of money to breed with.
Yeah.
50,000.
100,000.
No, I'd say 10,000.
Gerald's closest. It's 15,500
Still a lot
per
of money.
load.
Yeah. Oh, jeez.
I've been so careful to not have my head away from the painting, and then Eddie's have to go there.
I used to like this podcast.
What's funny is they probably just like take it out with a syringe. He doesn't get any of the happiness from it at all. Poor dog. They
Probably.
steal it from him and ship it around the world.
Yeah. There's a chocolate lab in my neighborhood that's a show dog and it's $600 a load.
Whoa.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, the only thing worse than being that dog is being the person that has to collect it.
Yeah.
Anyway, move on.
Moving on from dog breeding.
Oh,
Yeah.
So Rami won.
No, Maya won.
yay! Thank you, Remy. Thank you, Remy. Thank you.
Okay. So what are we reading next week?
Oh, yeah.
We are reading Hey, Remy, do you remember the name of the story, or do I have to read it?
Yeah, it's your story. This is all you.
Okay, we're reading It Had to Be Murder by Cornell Woolrich.
But before you go, let's take our relationship to the next level. Please share your thoughts on this story in the comment section at literaryroadhouse.com. But please don't wait until it's too late to conceive the most wonderful gift in the world. That is a review on iTunes, Stitcher, and Spreaker. And while we don't like to show any weaknesses or vulnerabilities, we talk about them anyway on our other shows, the Literary Roadhouse Book Club and the Bradbury Challenge. By the way, we recently adopted an unruly Mastiff. He helps us pay for this dog training and our podcast expenses at patreon.com/literaryroadhouse. Every muzzle helps. And as always, share this podcast with the rabid dogs in your life. Until next time, read a good story. My outro had the